Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to dive straight into the brilliant opening sequence of John Bunyan's 17th century masterpiece, Pilgrim's Progress. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A book from the 1600s? Sounds like a bunch of dusty, boring theology, right? Well, actually, as we unpack the source material today, we're going to uncover some incredibly profound, timeless psychological truths about the actual mechanics of human change. It's fascinating stuff, so let's just dive right in.
I want you to really think about this for a second. Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly realized you had to completely change your life? You see a hard truth about your situation, and you just can't unknow it. It's stuck there. But here's the catch. Making that realization public and actually acting on it, well, that almost always costs us the approval of the people around us.
And it leads us perfectly to this incredibly raw reality. Nobody warns you that the first honest look at your own life might feel exactly like a panic attack. What is so wild about this is how Bunyan completely skips the predictable moral sermonizing you'd expect. He opens his story right on this unfiltered feeling of pure panic. We don't start with some majestic celestial city. We start with a guy standing out in a field, dressed in rags, literally crying out because he finally sees his actual situation clearly.
Section 1. The Panic of Awakening. Let's look at how this very first chronological step of our journey builds, starting with that intensely painful, terrifying realization. To really grasp this, we've got to decode the allegory here. Christian, our main character, represents anyone waking up to their true condition. He lives in a place called the City of Destruction. Now, this isn't some comic book den of absolute villainy. It's really just the ordinary, unexamined life where people stay simply because, well, leaving is hard. He holds a book representing Scripture, which reveals this unavoidable truth. But consider that last element, the burden. Christian has this massive weight strapped to his back. His family and his neighbors, they think he has absolutely lost his mind. Why? Because they cannot feel the invisible weight of the guilt he's carrying. He is crumbling under a burden that is entirely hidden from everyone else. And Bunyan grounds this panic incredibly specifically. It's not just some vague modern existential dread. No, it is specific theological terror. When Christian cries out, "What must I do to be saved?" he's directly echoing the panicked Philippian jailer from Acts 16 in the Bible. And that mandate to flee from the wrath to come ties straight back to the judgment detailed in Isaiah 30:33. Bunyan is making absolutely sure his readers recognize their own biblical landscape right inside this fictional story.
Section 2. Fleeing the ordinary life. So, this internal panic has reached a boiling point, and now it forces physical action.
Enter a character named Evangelist. He finds Christian weeping out in the field and hands him a parchment telling him to flee. But notice what Evangelist does not do here. He doesn't offer to carry Christian's burden for him. He doesn't offer to hold his hand and walk with him the whole way. He doesn't instantly fix the problem. His only job, his solitary function in this entire moment, is to point toward a distant, barely visible light across a wide field and tell Christian to just keep his eyes locked right on it. So Christian takes action, and his flight is an act of sheer, unrestrained desperation. He physically turns his body away from his home. He puts his fingers in his ears, and he runs. He doesn't stroll, he sprints. He literally has to plug his ears because his own wife, his kids, his mocking neighbors, they are all calling out for him to come back. He forcibly has to block out the voices of his comfortable, unexamined life just to maintain his forward momentum.
Section 3. The naysayers and quitters. Because, of course, the second you decide to change your life that drastically, the external conflicts immediately pop up. Two of his neighbors actually decide to chase Christian down to drag him back. And their names tell you everything you need to know. Obstinate tries to physically drag Christian back, mocks the entire mission as pure madness, and then pretty quickly gives up. But Pliable is a bit different. Pliable is seduced by Christian's talk of shiny crowns and eternal garments, so he actually joins the journey. But he starts for entirely the wrong reasons. He's moved by the sound of the reward, not the reality of the cost. Which means, true to human nature, he is absolutely going to bail at the very first sign of trouble. And again, Bunyan is footnoting every single step with these profound biblical arguments. Obstinate and Pliable totally embody Jesus' exact warning in Luke 9 about putting your hand to the plow and looking back. They represent the two classic ways people fail to follow through on real, lasting change. Christian, meanwhile, describes his goal using the exact language of 1 Peter 1:4, an incorruptible inheritance. His motivation is grounded in something far, far deeper than just running away. He is running toward something indestructible. Section 4.
the Slough of Despond. Now, having the right motivation absolutely does not guarantee a smooth path. In fact, it's usually quite the opposite. Which brings us to a sudden, jarring internal conflict that halts both Christian and Pliable dead in their tracks. They fall headfirst into a bog called the Slough of Despond. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that this bog isn't a punishment. It's not evidence that the journey was a massive mistake. Bunyan explicitly tells us this bog cannot be drained and it cannot be paved over. It is simply the natural place where all the fear, doubt, and extreme discouragement that accompany real change settle and pool together. There are actually stepping stones hidden throughout it, specifically designed to help travelers, but people in a state of sheer panic, they almost always miss them. Let's contrast how our two travelers react when they hit this mud. This is just a masterclass in human behavior. Pliable, who was only in it for the shiny rewards, gets completely covered in mud, gets absolutely furious, struggles out on the side closest to his own house, and goes back to his unexamined life forever. Christian, however, keeps pushing. He fights toward the far side, the side closer to his actual destination. But there's a huge problem. He gets stuck. He's being dragged under the mud by that invisible burden of guilt still strapped to his back.
So the crucial point here is that Christian literally cannot pull himself out of this mess. His own effort is no longer enough. He is sinking. And it's right in this exact moment of total, utter helplessness that a character aptly named Help arrives from the outside, looks at him, and simply says, "Give me thy hand." And Help pulls Christian right out onto solid ground.
Now, Bunyan didn't just invent a convenient rescue out of thin air here. He is vividly dramatizing Psalm 40, verse 2. He brought me up also out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay. The profound argument Bunyan is making is that grace must arrive from the outside precisely when human effort fails. You cannot self-rescue from the Slough of Despond. You have to be drawn out by a hand reaching in from outside the mud. Section 5. Why discouragement comes first. Let's pull all these threads together to truly understand Bunyan's ultimate psychological and theological argument. Because the sequence of these events, it is entirely intentional. Do you notice what is completely missing from this sequence? Christian does not get his burden removed first. Nope, that happens much, much later in the story. Look at the order of events here. He realizes the agonizing burden. He sets the destination. He loses his companions, and then he falls into the bog, strictly in that order. And here is the really hard truth. Discouragement hits hardest after the decision, but before the visible progress. If you've ever left a toxic situation or finally told a hard truth or really committed to a new life path and found that things immediately got so much harder, well, Bunyan is speaking directly to you right across the centuries. He is telling you that you didn't misread the situation at all. The Slough of Despond isn't some final exam for the mature. It's literally the very first obstacle. That is exactly how the mechanics of change actually work. The adrenaline of leaving wears off, you have absolutely nothing yet to show for your bravery, and bam, you hit the mud. Which leaves us with one massive, ultimate question. When the adrenaline of leaving finally wears off and you inevitably hit the mud, what posture will you take? Are you going to be like Pliable, letting that initial difficulty convince you to retreat back to the familiar, unexamined city of destruction? Or will you be like Christian, willing to push toward the far shore, admit you are completely stuck, and reach out for the help you desperately need to keep going? Just a little something to chew on the next time you find yourself sinking in the bog.